Good afternoon. Welcome to our very first of hopefully many episodes of The Deep Dive, where we really examine the question of, can you heal? Can we heal from trauma? Can we heal from emotional pain? We are examining this deep question, not just the surface layer of the storytelling, but where we dive underneath to really say, can we transform this pain into purpose? I'm Janice Taylor, and I have been studying emotional pain for 30 years. I wrote my own healing modality because I was wanting to understand, how do we escape? How do we transform what happens to us as kids? For me, that has been a lifelong question. When I was 8 years old, was told I had an 85% chance of becoming an addict. It felt like a life sentence, like this can't be all of who I am. And as a result of that, it sent me on this journey to write my own theory. And so today I am so excited and honored that a friend who has had a road with pain, not only in her own life, but also the tragedy of losing her son, Christopher, to opioids. So we are going to discuss this question of, can we heal? And really examine where this can come into our life and really look at those questions. So Cammie Rice is here today. She is an author. She is an advocate. She is a mama. She is a fighter. She is changing legislation. She's parts of clinical trials. So welcome today, Cammie, to The Deep Dive. Thank you for being here. If you would be so kind, would you just give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll dive into some of the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, first I want to thank you and, congratulations on your new podcast series. This is amazing. Amazing. I love the name too, Deep Dive. And I have a feeling that's where we're getting ready to head, right?
We are.
Yeah. So I have a corporate background. I worked in the software industry for many years and then ended at the headquarters of Bank of America when I retired. And now I'm a professional philanthropist. That's what I do every day. So I wear many hats, but I founded my own charity called Christopher Wolf Crusade. And so, I stay busy with doing philanthropic work, which is what feeds the soul.
So tell me what led to CWC, because Christopher Wolf is your son. So tell me a little bit about that story and what happened and how you led to putting this charity together.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I mean, Christopher was diagnosed with a colon disease 20 some plus years ago. Wow. And he had to have his large intestine removed. And this was at the exact time that Purdue Pharma released OxyContin as the wonder drug. And we went home from the surgery with 90 OxyContins, followed by 90 more. And I fed them to him every 4 hours because that's what I was told to do. And we didn't know they were addictive. And at that point, I don't even know if doctors, I think they were being told that it wasn't addictive. And we didn't really realize it right off at first. He managed to continue to go to college and graduate from college, but he knew, he's the one that came to me and said, I have a serious problem. Like I have to have this medicine. And it hijacked his brain, Janice. And he fought in multiple treatment centers for over 15 years. And in 2016, he overdosed. February 26, 2016, I lost him. And life just became way too hard. And this was, a kid that was super disciplined. His goal was to be a Navy SEAL, so it just took over his life and hijacked his brain.
So I find this so fascinating because, I love what has happened. I don't love what has happened, but I love the insight that you're bringing to what has happened. And this terminology around hijacked his brain, like what did you notice right away when his brain got hijacked? Like what did you experience as a mom watching this little boy that is a little boy in there to have that, like hijack his brain? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, he just, he put in the effort. He fought it every day for 15 years. And I saw him, I went to all the treatment centers, did all the family activities. I saw him put forth the work and the effort. But yet when he would come out of treatment, it would again, just take over his brain. If anything happened to trigger him, any kind of stress or anxiety, and he was still having issues, having a large intestine removed and had it, multiple surgeries, had blockages, and, and they'd put him back on opioids. They didn't even know how to deal with somebody that was fighting addiction. Right.
Wow.
And so it was just this treacherous road that he constantly would get pulled back into. And then there was the guilt, right? When he would relapse, he would feel like, I failed you, Mom. I fail. I can't do this. I can't beat it. And that feeling of, there's many things about AA that I think are good, but, him standing up at meetings and saying, I'm Christopher, I'm an addict. He really felt like he was saying, I'm a loser. I'm a failure at life. And I think the stigma along with the psychological stigma of what that did. And it took me 2 years to say that my son overdosed, because we're measured by success on how we die, which is sickening. And the stigma is so real that I didn't want, as sad as it sounds, I didn't want my son I wanted him to have a respectable death. And it took me 2 years to even say the word overdose.
Okay. So you said so much in that. So first, I definitely want to dive in here around this idea of recovery and this idea of recovery centers and the model that they've built on. Now, again, in full love and affection for the 1950s, for the two gentlemen that put this together to create AA chapters, you and I have already had this discussion at length. It's like, is there an opportunity to evolve this idea of once an addict, always an addict, and having to say repeatedly, hi, my name is Christopher and I'm an addict. Hi, my name is this and I'm this. Hi, I'm such and such an alcoholic. Like, when you were witnessing that, do you feel that we are even aware of how that impacts someone's sense of self, their sense of healing? Like, what are your thoughts about that? Because I am an advocate. And again, I know that that's controversial because a lot of people live and die by the AA slogans. Right. But I have found that they've been built on blame and shame. What are your thoughts about that?
I agree. I think there are certain steps to the 12-step that are helpful, but I think words are very powerful. And what you speak into existence. So if you're speaking that you're an addict, and it's not positive, I think it destroys your self-esteem. And, no, there's nothing right about that. There's nothing right about it. And I watched it just pull him away. And here I am trying to fight the treatment centers going, I really don't think my son should be saying that. Right. And they're looking at me like, Mom, back off kind of thing. You need to stay out of it. Would have, could have, should have. I look back, could I save him? I mean, I had so many resources and multiple treatment centers, but at the time I didn't know what I didn't know. Right. And I really feel like Christopher sacrificed so that I would be doing the work that I'm doing, that I do every day to save lives. It didn't happen in vain. Like, what I'm doing every single day is to prevent, is to save lives. And I'm speaking out and trying to stop that stigma. Right. And like you said, taking pain to purpose, that is the recipe for getting through trauma.
And so how has it been responding? Because I want to talk about the stigma of the overdose. And I find it so interesting what you're talking about the dignity in death. How do we still claim that? Because even we're seeing that in suicide, right? We're seeing that evolution of like, they're a victim of that. And yet we still put a stigma attached to suicide and to overdose. And like, do you see the shifts happening in the world that you're going with, that kind of conversation around that?
Not enough. I recently helped out a young lady, her brother committed suicide, and she was so angry at her parents because they wouldn't speak out about it. And she said, we got to speak the truth, right? But they were so, again, they wanted their son to have a respectable death. They're in shock at the time. I mean, it's just, you got to connect with people when you're suffering, right? And to, I always say addiction's not the casserole disease. If your son had leukemia, you could share that with your neighbors and they would bring over those casseroles and they would support you. And, and I was guilty of it in the beginning, and I speak about that in my book. I was guilty of it too, right? Because I didn't want anyone to look bad at my son. He was such a good soul. He was such a good person, right? And so we really have to break the stigma around mental wellness. It is getting better. I'm seeing a shift. Is it happening fast enough? No. The suicide hotline in the United States is up 800%. So no, it's not moving fast enough. And I think the more we speak out about it, the more it gives permission for others to share.
It's so interesting when you talked about mental wellness and this thing. We've been really shifting the conversation here at HaHa to say, let's talk about emotional health. Like mental health, it carries the stigma that you must have a diagnosis. Oh, I'm a manic depressive. I have depression. I have anxiety disorder. I have generalized anxiety disorder. Just takes this further labeling, no different than I think in many cases the recovery side of the world. And at HaHa, I keep saying, let's just talk about emotional health, because emotion doesn't require a diagnosis. And this is where I keep saying, most of us fit in this normal distribution curve of emotional health, our emotions. Yes. And, this has been part of the philosophy that we've had, is that, if we take the fact that most people have a pain point before their 10th birthday, that then has a thorn that comes in and this love and belonging, it becomes a fester. And over time, it festers into our physical bodies. And then it can really just take over our life. So I would love to know, tell us about Christopher as a kid. What was he like? What did you like? Again, he sounds like a really special, sensitive soul. And unfortunately, in many cases, we see a higher incidence of emotional pain in physical ailments as well, because they're so wired sensitively and emotionally. And so they absorb all that pain into the body, like not just theirs, those that are around them. So let's talk a little bit about Christopher as a boy. I'd love to know.
It's so interesting what you just said, because that was Christopher. Super sensitive, and took over people's pain, really. But even little, he was just super disciplined. He was a Virgo. Everything had to line up, and he was into Legos and building things, and really wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Him and his best friend, he had one super close best friend, and Keith ended up being a Navy SEAL. And then when he got, I think, he was a warrior. I never had to get onto him about good grades. He put that stress on himself. So a little bit of a perfectionist, right? And a hugger. If he met it, he was going to hug you. And his younger brother said something at his funeral that just always has stuck with me. Chase said, I never heard anyone say, your brother reminds me of somebody, or I met somebody that reminds me of Christopher, because he was just so unique and special in his own way. And he was just such a listener. You know how sometimes you're talking to people and they're looking around, they're not really focused. He was zoomed in, and he did take on other people's problems and worries, So, but a super big smile.
I'm so glad that you
sorry.
I think this is such an important thing to discuss, because I think we have, along with the stigma, we assume that people that are quote unquote addicted, that, well, there must be an underlying mental illness if they are, or if when we look at people that are homeless, for example, well, they must have this. And what you really see when you look at those in recovery, for example, I spent time in recovery centers as a kid. I was put into them because there was this worry of, well, she's going to be an addict like my father was a chronic addict. And so, but when you really look at the ingredients, most of them are just sensitive, creative souls, and they absorb emotion. And I always say that whenever I meet someone that is quote unquote, and again, I say this because I'm not a fan of the label, but they're addicted, or they're in recovery, or that side of the world that wants to give this sort of label and diagnosis to it, I'm always saying, oh my gosh, but they're just a sensitive soul that have absorbed emotion. And they not only absorb their own, they absorb their family, they absorb their community, they absorb the world. So these kids that are spending so much time in quote unquote digital and social, they're just absorbing pain. And so I think it's fascinating and tragic that there's an 800% increase in suicide, because what do they do with this emotion? And that's like really, I say emotion unchecked, emotion unbirthed out of the body will turn on itself.
Yes.
And it stays in the body and stays in the spirit. Do you see that now that you've been so connected into the recovery side of the world, do you see a pattern of sensitive souls that are deeply creative, extraordinarily mindful? Do you see that?
I do. They're actually some of the smartest human beings on planet. They really are. They're very smart, because you have to be very smart to figure out how to deal with that issue of substance misuse, right? And so, but yes, super, super sensitive, and feel so bad about themselves, again, because of the way they're treated and the stigma around it, and hiding, and suffering alone. And silence is deadly. Just that it's so important to connect. It's all about connecting with other humans. And when you can't connect, right? I mean, I always say what got me through losing Christopher is love. Love. If I didn't have that connection and that love and purpose, right? Definitely the purpose, I would be in fetal position and not doing well.
So let's talk about that, because you have survived not only your personal stories, which I know a little bit about, of your own journey pre-children, which we all have, right? As moms are like, well, you had no life before us. And I'm like, oh, darling, you should have seen me at that festival. I'm like, thank God there wasn't social media, because I'm not so sure I would want to remember half of those moments. But your kids, once you have children, they're like, oh, well, you had no life, but I know that you have had quite the life. But for you, like, once you came through the trauma of losing a son, when did it just flip in your brain to say, but I got a crusade? Like, when did that, can you pinpoint it to a moment or describe what happened towards you that you said, okay?
Yeah, I think it was really, I was at our lake house, which was, just my refuge spot, with nature and being on the water and the trees and the whole bit. I really spent a lot of time journaling and just writing. And I wrote, I'm going to write a book. I don't know how I'm going to write a book. I'm not a writer, but I want to write a book. I just felt this fire inside of me that just happened. Like, if I don't share, if I don't warn people about what is going on, how many other parents are going to feel like I feel? And, there's no word in the dictionary for when you lose your child. It is so out of unnatural order. Yeah. And you don't ever get over it. You don't ever get over it. I can walk by his picture. I can smile and say, I love you, Christopher. And that same picture, I can walk by at 2 p.m. and I could be on the floor and crying. Their grief takes its own path. It attacks in different ways over the littlest things that are big that you think would really affect me. Don't. Something little as being in a store, and I always bought 2 pairs of socks for Trace and Christopher. And then I realized, what am I doing? Like, little things. My point is little things that can really trigger you. So I think what it was for me, and I know I went a long way to answer that question, it's when I started realizing if I don't do something to warn people, other people are going to feel like I feel. And I don't want that. I don't want that.
I just have to say amen to that, because I know that the courage it takes to pick yourself up off the floor when you've had this extraordinary pain, to then say, how do I take this and make something out of it? And, this has been my life's journey as well with the work that we do here, because I meet person after person, they've got all this pain sitting in the body, and they're like, I don't know what to do with it. Like, so right now, even conventional therapy, I'll give love to the therapists of the world. I don't want to be too mean about it. The same thing. I said, well, eventually this pain data that you own can become something, and it can become the fuel and the connection that you need in order to transform it. And if you can do that, if you can take the ingredients out of it, and I say the ethos and the ingredients out of it, then you can use it. Because ultimately, I always sort of wonder, and comes back to the question of, can we heal? Is the fact that what would be the point of us experiencing these most painful things unless we could do that, has always been my thought. Like, at some point, we have to honor the very things that have broken our heart. And I don't mean honor the person that broke our heart. It's more about the very event. How do we take this event? And this is what you're doing with not only his legacy, because look at how many people now know his name.
Yeah. Well, and it gets me emotional, but I will tell you, Janice, it sounds crazy to say, but Christopher's passing made me a better person. Yeah, it did. Yeah, heavy, right? But it did. It made me a better person, and that's really hard to say. I know he is at peace, and that gives me peace because he suffered so long and so hard, and life was so hard for him that that peace does give me peace. It's the missing. It's strictly missing him walking in the door, hugging me, calling him. That is the peace. I know he's good. I know he's good. I know he's helping me. I do. I get signs from him all the time. Having the affirmation that your spirit does go on has been such a silver lining, right? Because you think you know what happens, but I know. I'm just telling you, I know. I get signs from him that are just that's just him, right? So there have been silver linings to it. And you just also don't take life for granted. And it sounds so cliche, but I live it for every minute because you don't know, right?
Thank you. And I'm glad that it is emotional too, in some ways, because, whenever I've experienced this work throughout all these years and people have experienced extraordinary traumas and pain, I always say, what gift did they pass you? Because it's a baton. It's a baton. And if he's your baby, he passed a baton to you, and he paid the ultimate price with his life and experiencing that pain. But at the same time, he's batoned you. He's like, Mom, this is yours. Do you feel that he passed that baton to you?
100% plus. He was all about healing others. He wanted to go back and get his master's in social work. He just really cared about people. So yes, 100%. And that's why I love doing everything in his honor. Everything I can do. If somebody says, okay, I'm going to put a purple balloon in the sky and put his name on it, it's $100. Boom, I'm in. You know what I mean? Like anything that honors him, I'm ready to do it, but yes, I do 100% believe he's helping me. There's no question about it.
So I want to talk about now, like, this baton that he has passed you, because wow, have you taken the baton, my friend, from okay, so we got a book, we have a clinical trial, we have changing laws and regulations. It's taking on. So tell me a little bit of the very first sort of like step you took towards the purpose of this baton pass, and then I do want to hear about the book.
There's so many lanes, right, to substance misuse that you can take, and treatment is so important, but it was too raw for me to go back into that box right away. I just kept hearing, stop it before it starts, stop it before it starts. And you look at Christopher spent an enormous time in the hospital. And when you look at our society today, we use coaches for everything: birthing coach, executive coach, workout coach, you name it. Except when you're in a health crisis, you have no coach. And I really felt like, had we had a coach in the hospital at bedside to share, these are the dangers of the medication. If you have to be on an opioid, you've had a car accident, whatever the situation, right? And you have to be on that opioid, how important it is to quickly taper off and to provide non-addictive pain solutions, right? And so I got certified in trauma, and I did all these, things, because it has to be transferable at bedside, at the patient bedside. And, in the US, I don't know if they have this in Canada, but in children's hospitals, they had child life specialists. But when you're 18 and above, there's no one. And nurses are too busy. Doctors are too busy. So we started a clinical trial. Again, it was just, I got a champion, thank God, at one of the top trauma hospitals in the United States here in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Shanker, chief of orthopedic trauma surgery. She's like, I'm with you on this. She said, I didn't get that training in med school. Neither, and nurses aren't getting this in med school. Doctors don't get, you think with all the schooling, but they don't, and so they don't have the time to. So having that time, a lot of times the patient needs a listening ear. They need somebody to vent to.
Amen.
Right? So they have anxiety, they have stress, they have depression, they're in the hospital. So anyway, we've had a clinical trial now going on for 3+ years. We have moved into rural Georgia. We're going into 4 rural communities because they desperately need help. where we've moved into sickle cell, doing amazing there. We've moved into sports medicine. So yeah, we're expanding very, very quickly. The nurses, actually, we've been a tremendous respite for nurses because they don't have time. And, they've been taught, if the pain scale, if a patient says, hey, my pain is 7 or above, give them an opioid, right? That's the only tool that they have in their toolbox. Well, now they can call in the life care specialist and we can help with pain and pain distraction.
Okay. So, this is brilliant. So when I watched the TV series Dope Sick, and again, I know that it was fictional, non-fictional, but I was so struck by it in such a way that I was watching this. And the scene that got me the most out of all the scenes, because there was a lot, was that right in the hospital bed, the woman, unbeknownst to the nurse, again, not knowing that this is so addictive, she's just doing her job. She's just like, the guy's hitting the call button. My sister's been a nurse for 30 years. She just got her 30-year pin. So I'm very familiar with the stories. And when she brought up the card that said, tell me what your pain is on the pain scale, all I could think about, knowing what you are championing, and not just championing, pioneering in Georgia. I hope this goes across the world, because we have the same issue here in Canada. You've got overworked nurses, you've got overburdened emergency rooms. People just don't have the time. I can't imagine being a nurse today with everything that's going on. My sister is a champion of that, and I just can't even imagine. And when they brought out the card and they do the pain scale, all I could think of, Cammie, was like, your mission right there. It's like, hold on the pain scale first, because what is someone going to say the moment that they wake up and they have just had surgery? I've had surgery, and they say, what's your pain scale? And I'm like, 100.
Yes.
Like, so, and it was not any disrespect to her whatsoever. She's just doing her job. Like, tell me where. But the fact that the pharmaceutical industry penetrated that hospital room.
Yes.
I spent 10 years in pharmaceuticals out of college, and I get it. I will say there is useful places for the medication, but all I could think was, this is where your life care specialist, right there, right at that moment when they wake up, right there.
Yeah. And there's so many things that you can do to distract the brain when it comes to pain. I wish I knew those things, right? Woulda, coulda, shoulda, when I had Christopher in all that pain. But, and that's why we're always adding to the toolbox. We're adding music therapy. We're getting certified in everything that we could possibly get in, because it's not one size fits all, and some people have a much higher tolerance for pain than others. We're also doing in sports medicine, we're actually doing telehealth with patients prior to surgery, so we can set a clear expectation. Hey, you're having surgery. There's going to be a little bit of pain, and pain is a messenger to tell your body where to heal. It's not always a negative thing if we look at it differently, of telling our body where to heal, right?
Right.
And so it's really a different setting of an expectation, a different language to use, different brain distractions. There's so many different things you can do to alleviate pain besides look for that answer in the pill. And I don't think people realize all the side effects, not only addiction being number one, but there's many nasty side effects to be on opioids just for a week. And I don't think people realize you can become addicted with one prescription, and so that's really, and we do follow up once they leave the hospital, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks. Are you off your opioids, right?
Yep.
70% of the patients didn't know what an opioid was or that they were on one. Yeah.
See, now again, like just a total, unawareness.
Right. We had one guy who was like, oh my God, my wife is addiction. Like, I can't go home with these pills. I didn't realize these were opioids. My wife suffers from this. I can't take this bottle, So it was that kind of thing, right? You just, wait a minute, let's stop. Let's come up with some help. The other thing is we've been able, because you're a listening ear and you spend so much time talking to the patients, they open up and you uncover all these other comorbidities, domestic violence, food insecurity, home insecurity.
That's it.
And so they don't fall through the gap, right? We can get them the social workers, we can get them the help that they need. So yeah, there's been a lot of silver linings, so much more to this position than we ever dreamed. But yes, I'm going to get it. It's got to scale. It has to
scale. Well, it's so interesting because I met a physician from Oklahoma who's trying to change some of the the laws there as well. And, I said to him, I said, after pain, the initial event, take any life situation, surgery, but even just take the initial events that happen in our first 10 years of life, which is what we study.
Yes.
Pain left in the body, emotional pain in the body can manifest as physical. And so sometimes you can stay too long at that party where the physical ailment has in fact healed, but emotional pain has taken over. And if emotional pain takes over, that's when the addictive part of our brains kick in as well. So not only is the drug biologically addictive in the way that it's constructed, but the second part of that, we know that emotional pain is the most addictive live agent we have in the body. It will have us addicted to humans, to food, to sex, to drugs, to alcohol, and then all you do. So if you look at the initial incidence of why they're needing surgery in the first place, and if you trace that back to the core root, chances are is they may have absorbed emotional pain that is now manifested into a physical ailment.
And it has to go somewhere.
It has to go somewhere. So even when you were talking about him within the stomach, we know that early pain actually with kids gets rests in the stomach. So you see celiac, you see a lot of these components of it that you go, okay, which part of it is a biological and which part of it is emotional?
Yes.
And that's been my lifelong, piece of it, saying, okay, so after the pain has subsided, the physical pain, it's not actually them as an addict, it's their emotional pain that's going, fix this now. And you can't put your finger on that. And so this is the work that you're doing with this it's the front line. It's the front line.
I think it's so preventable, right? I just, we don't, as a society, we don't do enough to prevent, to stop it before it starts. We're not really good at preventing a whole lot of things, right? Diabetes. I mean, if you look at all the things. And so I see this just growing. I think more things added to their toolbox and continuing to grow. And it needs to be a human being, a human with that connection, maybe utilizing some technology and some apps, but you still need that human touch point. That's the key to it.
I agree. It's that connection.
Yes.
So from that led to the book. Let's talk about the flight. So let's talk about this. How did this come to be?
Yeah, thank you. I've had, again, it goes back to the fire of frustration. I'm like, I am not getting to the masses fast enough. And if I get this book out there and it can touch people I don't even know. And I put QR codes in the book. So I was able to, some people are not into reading anymore. Reading is kind of fallen off, which, no criticism, but I put QR codes after every single chapter where a video comes up and I talk about relapsing. I talk about, it really turned into so much more. It's about forgiveness. It's about compassion. It's, it really, while I share my journey, Janice, it allows the reader to think about their own journey and everyone has pain. Okay. And it's not comparable. It's not measured. There's no reason 100%. To compare pain.
Yeah.
But taking that pain and turning it into purpose. And it doesn't have to be starting a charity and writing a book. And it could be walking dogs at the animal shelter. It could be, it could be the littlest things to have purpose, to feel purpose, to help with the pain. And I use the analogy of a flight, because I spent a lot of time. We lived in Hong Kong for 7 years, and I spent a lot of time on an airplane. And I felt like there were so many analogies to connect with a flight. We land at different places. We land at success and happiness and sorrow and grief and sickness. And you have to keep the fuel to keep going. And people unexpectedly leave our flight, whether it's death or a divorce or whatever. And then new people join your flight. And so I really use that analogy and kind of, I go into a fiction place in the book because it's so hard to explain Christopher's story. So I had to kind of go out of an out-of-body experience to be able to explain the journey. And then most importantly, not most, it's all important, but at the end, I put a resource library in the back. And again, that's a QR code. So I can constantly keep different solutions, different resources for people updated in the book. I really wanted it to be a tool to help people. And so, and I hope it, I have big plans for it. I want it to be a movie. Honestly, I see it as a movie. I've wrote
Okay.
it with the preface of it being, I can just see it being a movie, so.
Well, you have come to the right place, because we're going to do a little bit of your whiteboard at the end, which we're going to dive into. But okay, so I want to make sure that we touch base on this. So where is it available as well? So it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble?
Yes, thank you for asking. So it's The Flight, My Opioid Journey. It's Cammie Wolf Rice. I also want to mention all proceeds go to the charity, 100%. All net profit goes to the charity.
This is, okay. So in Christopher's words, what you think, what, if him being here with this journey with you right now, what do you think he would be saying to you, besides giving us all a hug, which, by the way, maybe that's a separate entity. We just have Christopher hugs set up on every corner, where we just have Christopher hugs, and we just have people hug. But what do you think he'd be saying to you right now?
It's so interesting you asked me that, because I've done a lot of podcasts. I've never got that question. I wrote a chapter in the book. It's called The Portal. And Christopher enters the book and he talks to me. So I'm going to leave that as a cliffhanger, that it's in the book. Christopher does talk to me in the book. And it's what I imagined him talking to me and what he would say to me, if he could say to me. But I know he's amazingly proud. And I feel that. I feel that energy, that he's so proud. And he wants this to be resolved. It's getting worse and worse with fentanyl and all that. So I think he's super proud that I'm speaking out. And I know that he's super proud that I'm doing all this in his honor and his legacy. He's got a NICU unit in Cambodia that's named Christopher's Hope. He's got a medical clinic in Cambodia. It's a lot more than just the charity. No, I don't mean to say just, but the charity. Yeah, I've just, everything I can do in his honor, I'm here to do.
Well, again, in the tragedy of his death, you took all of this pain and you transformed everything, the system, the tools, the storytelling, his legacy. My gosh, Cammie, do you ever just take a moment and just to honor you? Yeah. And this whole, just you did this.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. We just have to say that is extraordinary. And I know he'd be giving you a monster hug at this moment. And I love that.
I know I'll see him again.
For sure. Okay. So at this point of the deep dive, so as you know, because you've witnessed the full whiteboard, so part of the invention of AHA is I believe everyone has an AHA. And I was like, what if I could make a math formula? And what if I could connect these dots and point this into the direction? Your abrupt, I always say God, the universe, however you define it, he sends you a whisper, a 2x4, and a truck. In your unfortunate case, you got a truck that mowed over your life and forced you into a completely new direction. And you grabbed all of the ingredients of your life to put this into all of the different places, from the flight to the future movie, to the nonprofits, to the around the world, to the legislation. But I believe every single person has within themselves the gift. And we just have to unlock it. So we're going to do a micro board if you're game, because maybe we have the next act to all of this now that we need to carve out. So give me 2 seconds. I'm going to grab the board. I'm going to slide it over.
Okay. I'm excited.
Now, this was someone's last board that I did.
Wow.
So I will say that there is method to the madness. So I will just erase this for now. Okay. So for those that are at home and listening, get a pen, because you can find out your golden triangle as well. So when I was really looking at relapse rates, as you know, I as well have had my share of growing up in the addiction. My dad was an addict. I've been exposed to that. I was put into Alateen as a kid to prevent becoming an addict. And then I was also introduced to aftercare programs for those that were also addicts to prevent me becoming an addict. So they put me in addiction programs to prevent me becoming an addict. It wasn't effective. But what was effective was the knowledge I felt that when I studied relapse, I said, what is missing from the relapse equation? Why do people relapse? I wanted to say, we don't just say, oh, I want to just keep taking this drug. The biological responses I was getting didn't feel like it was right. And I really didn't buy the whole once an addict, always an addict. I thought, how fatalistic. There's so much more to this person than just that. And then you would hear them counting the days. And I thought, well, you are white knuckling in your life if you were just doing that. So 25 years ago, well, really 30 now, I wrote a theory, and then I wanted to do the math. Could I take pain data from before your 10th birthday and read it? So I came up with the golden triangle. So Miss Cammie, what was your full name at birth?
But my biological father left when I was very, very young.
How old?
I reconnected him. 2.
Okay. And what year were you born, if you don't mind me asking?
1962. Yeah, I'm old.
Okay, there's our 2 2s. So we know your pain point is 2 already. What was the birth date?
My birthday, October 26th.
Okay, so here we have a confirmation of our first triangle of 3. 2 2 2. So we know that your first golden triangle date is 1964.
Okay, then what does that mean again, the 1964?
So that means that part of your next act of your creation, whether it's the music, the words, the style, if you trace back what you're dealing with right now to the roots of 1964, you're going to find some more solutions to solve the current problem that you're building upon. So let's take addiction. So you need to look back in 1964, and you're going to look at the laws. You're going to look at where you were, what was happening, even the music, the attitude, solutions. What you're going to find in there is more of what you need in terms of data to solve the problem, the pain that you are currently solving. So that's your first golden triangle. Every single person has 3. So you have 3 connecting dates that set your life in motion. And we call this the big P. So we call it the big P because pain equals purpose. The big P is the P equals the P. There's no way around it. There's no other earthly reason for you to have ever had pain other than for it to inform your calling and your purpose. There's no other reason for it. I've looked. Now, in some cases, it's diagnosis, but for the most part, it tells us everything. When I was an 8-year-old child, I was sitting in a squatter house surrounded by addicts. I had my training as a child to understand what that would be like. And I've used that data to create what I'm creating today. And I believe everyone has it. Now, it could be a book, it could be the name of a movie, which you've already said. It's called The Portal.
Oh, because it's the chapter that Christopher talked. Ooh, that got goosebumps.
That's your name. It's not The Flight, it's The Portal.
Wow.
Because what you did, and this is already goosebumps, my hair is standing on end.
Yeah, it is. That's crazy.
You already have said it. It's the portal.
I can't imagine writing another book. It was so hard.
This is the movie. This is the movie.
Oh, you think the movie is The Portal?
The movie's The Portal.
Wow. Okay.
The movie's okay. My hair is standing on end because from this was taking this ingredients, but the portal is what you've done is you've given us a window into what it's like. Yes. That's the continuation of this story, my friend. Now, you're going to find the ingredients and the feel. I want to tell you that the date of the start of this movie starts in 1964.
Wow.
So you anchor to this, the United States, where you were living in 1964. That's where the movie starts. Wow. And you trace back this story to the portal and the evolution. Now, we have 2 other important dates. One is your mother and your father. Now, in the AHA world, we say that there's always a gift passed. Christopher has passed an extraordinary gift to you, but so did your mother and biological father. Okay. So we have some pieces of your own story now that come into this. So we know that your mother was born, I think you told me at the start, was 1945.
Yes.
Now, tell me a little bit about your mom. Where was she in the birth order?
So she was second. She had 3 brothers, 1 older, 2 younger.
Oh, so she was the only child, only girl in the mix of all of that?
Only girl. 3
So
boys.
when you see you have only one gender or one daughter in the midst of all of that, they actually will operate through life more like a bit of the black sheep, but they'll also show up as only children. So they'll already sort of feel sort of set apart. And as a result of that, they struggle finding grounding. They often don't feel grounded. They don't really know how to emulate. They may have also had a tough relationship with their mother as a result of that.
Totally.
Did she? Yes.
Oh my God. What? Yes. Wow. You hit that on the head. And exactly everything you just said, everything absolutely on point with that, Janice, 100%.
Yeah. So,
okay.
And then that meant that for you as the daughter of that, there'd be the 3 of you in what we would say is a triangulation, because how her mother treated you, then it would have been you, and then it would have been, yes. And so that is the spice of our pain. But then if we flip it over into our purpose, we're like, what does the data have to be? So how old was her brother, the first one below her? Would you know? Maybe a year, 2 years?
Yeah, probably 2, maybe 3.
Okay,
and then
so
there was another brother, a younger
okay.
brother.
So usually when there's a new one born, it changes the order and shifts, and it turns on all of the ego voices. And then that's when people become addicted into their codependent triangles and change. So let's say for this use case, probably 1947. So the other part of the portal, so if you notice like 1964 and 1947, and we know that your dad was, your biological dad, you figured was 1941.
Yeah, or 42, either one.
Okay, so it's interesting because he's born January 1st of the 11th day. So we know that his pain point is 1.
Okay, so January 11th. So January being 1 and then the 11th, right?
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
So there's 3 ones.
Yep.
So it's 1, 1, 1, 1. So we know that your biological dad's pain point was probably 1. And so, and if he was born in 1941, and you're going to go back and find out, and it's probably going to blow your mind because he probably was born in 1941.
Yeah.
That what you'll find is that him having 1, that means that your other golden triangle date of the biological father would be 1942. Now, these 3 intersecting dates are going to tell us everything about the portal.
Wow. Okay.
So they're going to tell us what was happening around the introduction of pharmaceuticals and hospital care and addiction then. What was happening in the 60s and our attitudes towards the stigma. All of the topics that we've uncovered today, all of your answers to it will lie in these states.
Wow.
And so whatever was happening to you in terms of even color and aesthetics and characters and all of that, that will serve the portal. So this is the message. And it lies within you. This is now your story. You birthed the flight, which was Christopher and Christopher's story, and your gift, now you, the ingredients from you, is the portal.
Wow. I love it.
That's the name. And it's still linked to Christopher. So if we were to continue this exercise, of course we would go and go. But definitely you're going to get, so what I always suggest at this point for you in the homework is you need to make a playlist. Okay?
Okay.
So we need to get some of your portal jams. On the top of your playlist, you're going to call it the portal. And you're going to look for music from 47, 1942, and 1964. And you're just going to search through the songs and the hits. You're just going to search through the songs and the hits, and whatever strikes you, throw it in the portal playlist. That's going to become your jam for 20 minutes a day, and you're going to get a flood through the portal. There's the of like, oh, that's the theme song in the movie. Oh, they're jamming it out to this. You're just going to feel all of that. The second thing is you're going to look for movies that were made during those years for inspiration.
Okay.
So when you're describing the movie, because you said right at the hour, you know what, Janice, I want this to be a movie. Done. We've named it. It's called The Portal. We know that it starts in these years, which is your pain point of 1964. We're going to know the soundtrack. We're going to know the city it takes place in. So now you're going to be like, where does this start? Does this start in Atlanta? Where were you in 1964?
I was in Indiana, and that's where the flight starts, is where back in Indiana is how I start the flight.
So we know that this story starts in Indiana. We also know that you're going to find the aesthetic of the movie from this time period. So you're looking at, again, what movies were made that told stories of young men. Okay. Stories of young men that got lost, because the first person that got lost in your life was the biological dad. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then in the background of this movie, of this story, is these strong women. Your grandmother, your mother, and you. The factor of 3 women. So this story takes place around a young man, but 3 different strong women around him.
Okay. Wow.
Because that's the ingredients of your soul. So within 10 minutes, we've named a movie. We've given it context. Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
So there you go. The big P, which is yours and everyone else. Everything you need to know is in here. So I also say, the more that you can live in this, the more you can see the books that were written at this time. They're all inspiration for what you need in order to carve out what this portal looks like.
Interesting. Thank you, Janice. That was awesome. I love it.
That was so
the big P, and then it's the big portal, and then pain into purple. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of connection here. A lot of connection. I want to ask you an off-the-wall question. Because I love how you're tied in. I'm a numbers fanatic as well. Mm-hmm. My birthday being the 26th, and then Christopher passed away on February 26th, the same number date. Does that mean anything?
Yes. So we know that your pain point is 2. That probably tells us with Christopher's, his was 6. So when he was 6 years old, something clicked over in him. So he is the other part of your golden triangle. So what year was he born?
1983.
So I would say 1989 is where this story ends. And you're probably going to follow a young man from 1964 to 1989. And this music from here should be included on your playlist, because that's probably where his pain point is.
You know what? I have in the back of my book a music playlist right now. And see, the beautiful thing is it's a QR code, so I can easily get songs from this genre from this time and add it to that playlist. Yes. I can always update it because it's a QR code.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So your story actually follows in the portal a young man who started in 1964 to 1989. And that's because this is Christopher's pain point. So what we know about the big P is that when the ego voice turns on, they separate themselves from their soul. They separate from it because the pain, whatever they witnessed, and sometimes it doesn't have to be blunt force. Like we always think trauma needs to be severe abuse or no. It's just the break in the spirit when he goes, wow, this world is really not what I thought it's going to be about. So I'm going to hide a part of myself away. And I'm going to lock that into a box and I'm going to bury it in myself. So the reason why I said his was 6, and I don't even need to know any of the other stories, is because right away when you tell me that there's the corresponding numbers, and I know your big P is 2, it usually leaves one extra date, 6. And in that case, it's probably what his pain point was. It was probably when he was 6.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So if you go back to 1989, where Christopher was, that's also going to be part of the ethos. Did he have Spider-Man pajamas? Did he, all of the ingredients that you need in your big P in order to burst the stream of the portal, that's the last part of the ingredients of all of this. Okay. So what happened in 1989 would have been significant. So you would also look at, did they change the laws in 89? What happened in 1989? Because Christopher has left you all the clues. So this is now what's great about the golden triangle and why I love doing this all day long for humans. Like we get books, movies, plays. But everyone's like, how do you name them? I'm like, I don't, they do. I just listen. So I just listen. And as soon as you said the portal, my hair stood. See, I can't even say the portal without my hair standing on end. Look at it. It's like literally standing on it. I was like, that's the name of the movie.
That's wild. And like I told you, I've done so many podcasts. No one has ever asked me the question that you asked me, as if Christopher was going to speak to you. And immediately that chapter came to my book, because I really wanted him to be in the book speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, wow, love it.
Okay.
Oh, this was powerful. Thank you so much, Janice. This is amazing.
Thank you for being my first guest of hopefully, please refer anybody to me. I'm happy to interview them. At the end of every podcast, we will do the gift. So this is a gift again. And I just want to send so much love to Christopher and to you, because this is the next chapter. This portal is the next chapter for you. It's the portal.
What you're doing is amazing, Janice. And, we're both about just helping people and healing people. And I just love this. I love the Golden Triangle. I'm so honored to be the first guest on your podcast. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And for me to look at the gift, and how unique is this? Like, no one else doing a podcast anywhere in the world is going to get the Golden Triangle.
No.
So that is amazing gift.
Thank you. Well, you know where I got it from? I got it from my pain. Right? I got my Golden Triangle from my pain. And I thank my dada who's in heaven. He never got to see, because of his addiction, he died, and he never got to see the power of his gifts. And so, the baton got passed. So it's the way that I can honor him, and I can honor the legacy. So thank you for being part of the first deep dive. Again, please head to Amazon and check out The Flight. Stay tuned for the soon to be released movie of The Portal. And please go to your website, which is CWC.NGO. CWC.NGO. Please head to the website. Stay tuned. If you do not have this in your state, please reach out to Cammie, because I think this is going to change hospitals, change care, change this opiate addiction epidemic, because it's an epidemic.
Yes.
It's an epidemic. Don't be afraid to do the deep dive, because when you do the deep dive, we find the gifts.
Yes. Thank you,
Okay.
Janice.
Bye.
Yes.